You went into the Marine Corps when you were 17, but a very young 17. I think you were just 3 weeks into your 17th year when you went into the Marine Corps. So I'm
Yes.
interested why you went into the Corps, but maybe more why you went in so young.
I knew from the time I was 10 or 11, maybe 12, that I would go into the Marine Corps. My family has a long tradition of military history going back to the Revolutionary War, primarily Army, though my dad's brother was in the Navy during World War II. And my dad's first cousin was in the Marine Corps during the Korean War. So I knew it would be a challenge, or it would be challenging. And then I was missing the adventure. You know, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but
You were looking for a young man of 17 looking for something exciting to do?
An adventure, yeah. I was in a Catholic high school and I just found it incredibly boring. And I was really having angst about organized religion at the time. And there was so much happening in the world, and I wanted to be a part of it.
And
So
what year was this when you went into the Corps?
1968.
So this was 68, and you just said there's a lot going on in the world and you're looking for adventure. Were you, I mean, surely you had heard of Vietnam. Was that forefront in your mind when you think I'm going to go into the Marine Corps? I'm looking for something interesting and exciting to do. Is that linked specifically in your mind to Vietnam at that time?
Yes, it was. You know, again, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, you know, got to stop the Red Horde. We were indoctrinated from early grade school, you know, about the evils of communism. And, you know, like during the Hungarian Revolution, my parents and some other folks from church sponsored a Hungarian doctor and his wife. And, you know, he would talk about just how hard it was under a communist regime. And, you know, I just wanted to be a part of putting an end to that.
So let me jump ahead then. So when do you actually arrive in Vietnam? You go into the Corps in what month in 68?
I went in, my birthday's July 4th. So I went in the Marine Corps the 22nd of July, 23rd of July, 1968. I actually got my orders to Vietnam while I was still 17.
Holy cow.
Turned 18 while I was home on leave. You know, flew back. I'm not exactly sure the date, but flew back to California, the staging battalion, did my staging battalion. About a week after Armstrong landed on the moon is when I actually physically went to be, you know, and we left El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, flew to Hawaii for fuel, got off the plane for 45 minutes while they refueled. That's my only trip to Hawaii. Okinawa. They said we'd be there for several days. I was there one night, and then on a manifest to go to Da Nang the next day. Was in Da Nang one night. Flew up on a 123 to Dan Ha.
Yeah.
Was there a night, and then I was trucked to a place called Dan Ha West, where I guess the regimental or the battery headquarters was. And I picked up my 782 gear, my rifle, you know, all the accessories, flak jacket, jungle utilities, and then flew on a helicopter out to a place called the Rock Pile.
The Rock Pile, yeah.
And when I was at the Rock Pile, I had a friend that we went in the Marine Corps together, but he was 6 months older than me, and he'd gone over to Vietnam in February of 68. And I knew he was the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. I had no idea what company. So as I was checking in at the rock pile, I asked if there's any possibility I could ever go visit them. And they knew that there was a company of 3-3 up on Mutter's Ridge. And they asked me if I wanted to go with our battery CO or FO. And I said,
Forward
sure.
observer.
Yeah, forward observer.
Yeah.
So we get flown up there, and I had never seen anything like that before in my life. You know, it was a hilltop. There was a company of Marines there, somewhere around 200 guys. We had 2 FOs, one from the 1st Battalion, 12th Marines, and then ours from the 4th Battalion, 12th Marines. And so, you know, we got there, there were already holes dug, so we just dug them more, made them cleaner.
Like foxholes?
Pardon me?
Like foxholes?
Foxholes or shell
Yeah.
craters. And this place had been bombed, you know, been bombed heavily. A lot of craters.
Is that what you mean, that you've never seen anything like this before? It was just a
Oh
place
yeah,
that
no,
had
that's what I
just
mean.
devastated because of.
There were tree parts, but no trees. You know, I remember when I was flying from Don Howe to the rock pile, I thought it was fall because we're flying along the Camwell River and there's no leaves on the trees. But then as I look out farther, there are leaves. So I didn't know anything about defoliation or anything like that then.
Yeah.
It was a really bleak experience. It was eerie. It was just, it was haunting. I guess, you know, that whole experience up there was just incredibly haunting.
So what are the things, I mean, as you're using these words, eerie, haunting, so, I mean, what are the elements that lead you to those kinds of words? So you've said that the place is bombed out, there are tree parts, but no trees. I mean, what are the other things that make it eerie, that make it haunting when you're there?
The 0311s, the grunts that were up there, all just so taggart and bleak. You know, you've heard the expression 1,000-mile stare. A lot of these guys had that. And you know, and I'm as I get some free time, I'm going around looking for my friend Jim, and basically nobody's heard of him. So it didn't take long to figure out that he wasn't there.
So you said that before you went into the Corps, one of the things that was really on your mind was the struggle against communism. Now you've landed in I Corps, you're in Da Nang, Dong Ha, Route 9, out to the rock pile. Now you're at Mutter's Ridge. So all throughout northern I Corps, right? Are you still thinking about communism? Is that what's foremost on your mind? Why am I, because you must be asking yourself as a young 18-year-old, what am I doing in I Corps? And is the answer, I'm here in the struggle against communism? Is that still?
Well, communism was part of the entry ideal. After 3 days, 4 days up on Mutter's Ridge, it changed from stopping communism to staying alive.
Mm-hmm.
The whole dynamic just irrevocably changed in my mind. We got probed. There were shots and people throwing grenades, and you know, just I knew it was just chaotic. It was. It's not like John Wayne movies, or there's no, certainly my images of what combat would be like were put to rest very quickly. It wasn't until the second or third night that we got overrun. I mean, we got probed, and a couple of Americans got killed, and they killed some MVA. But the last night I was there, they literally overran us. It's hard to put into words the absolute horror of, just the noise, the smell, the confusion, people running around. I shot my first person that night. He fell in front of my position, and and whenever pop-up flares would go up through the night, I'd see his form, and I swear to God he was moving, and I'd shoot him again.
Hmm.
And this went on all night long. One of the other, we had a young PFC, probably older than me, who was shot and killed, a guy from a 105 battery, guarding his FO. First American person I ever saw dead. I mean, close to me. When I came back from Vietnam, my mother told me that the reason I came back alive is because she went to church every day. And I looked at her and said, the reason I came back alive is because I wasn't afraid to break commandments.
You used a term that I've often heard, but actually I've never really paused and asked a person what the term means, because I think in a way it's kind of self-explanatory, but I wonder if you'd be willing to describe it. You say that they're on Mutter's Ridge, that, if I believe that's where you were, that the NVA probed, and then on another occasion, the NVA overran the Marines there. What does that term mean, overran?
They were mixed up with us. We had a perimeter. It was really kind of a, I don't know if you can call it a perimeter, but they were in with us. And pretty much anything that stood up was a target.
So this is a context then where if you're in one of these foxholes, the enemy's not in front of you, or if you're being flanked, the enemy's not over there, the enemy's in 360, potentially
360 degrees. Yeah.
And the assumption is that if somebody is on foot, then that person is an adversary, is an enemy.
Right. And they were killing guys in their foxholes. We had, the next morning, I can't remember, it was like 26 or 27 dead KIAs and over 50 wounded. So, 1/3 were casualties.
Wow.
And chaos doesn't even do the experience justice. It was quite literally the worst experience of my life.
I can imagine that. It sounds like, I mean, hand-to-hand combat is involved here.
Yep. We had one guy kill an NVA soldier with the K-bar. And I saw him the next morning just sitting there with this K-bar in his hand, and his eyes focused on nothing. And that was the really haunting part. The next morning, we finally got gunships in, but they couldn't fire on us because they were mixed up with us. And
how long did that whole thing go on?
About 3 hours.
And did it end when the sun came up?
No, it ended. It went from about, they came in after midnight, and by 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they were gone. When the sun came up, I mean, and on top of everything else, these FOs are bringing an artillery in as close as they possibly can. And we've got gunships up above us. It was this alternative gunships, artillery. And it was the sound was, it just was loud, very piercing.
I'm listening, to what you're describing. I'm thinking of uh, not having any idea. I mean, how incredibly stressful this would be, and it goes on for some time. Um, what do you do when you are finally certain that at least for now it's over? Is it just you just slump down, take a breath, and just stare at nothing for 10 minutes? What happens in that moment?
Well, there was never, they always kept us busy. We were clearing bodies, getting our KIA into body bags on an LZ, corpsman taking care of the wounded. Seeing who was with us and who wasn't.
Mm.
The Marine Corps doesn't give you a whole lot of idle time.
In retrospect, is that probably a good thing?
It is a good thing. If I'd been in similar, the Marine Corps is just an incredible organization. And for however long I'll live, I will always proud to have been a Marine.
Mm.
But I'll always be ashamed of having been in Vietnam. I hated Vietnam. I still hate it. It's hard to express the terror of war, the uncertainty of war, the chaos. It's just abject chaos, but I was blessed with good leaders, and I became an 18-year-old sergeant.
A little while ago, you said what I think was maybe one of the most poignant things I've ever heard, and that is that when you came home, your mom said you survived because she went to church every day, and you responded, "I survived because I was willing to break the commandments." It's pretty powerful. I think I know what you mean. Can you spell that out a little bit?
After I got wounded, killing didn't bother me anymore. And pretty much the whole time I was in Northern I Corps, it was a free fire zone, and we didn't hesitate to fire. They were just all our enemy.
So a free fire zone being the idea that
if you were there,
yeah.
you were the enemy.
Yeah.
You were, and we didn't have Viet Cong. We had regular NVA.
Right.
I mean, these guys were in uniforms, well disciplined. A formidable enemy, and they were smart. They were. It just. I was scared. I mean, you basically every day you wake up, you're just glad to see I didn't wake up dead. I just thinking about it, my hands shake. I didn't want to be there, but telling your platoon sergeant you wanted to go home didn't work.
Right. I've heard another Marine who was in the same area you were. I think you might have been there a little bit before you, but speaking of these NBA, acknowledging their skill, acknowledging their perseverance, acknowledging their willingness to absorb tremendous casualties. He said that he hated them. If there's any way for hatred to be pure, I guess, the idea of purity and hatred going together, but if there's any way for hatred to be pure, that he hated them with a pure hatred.
Unbridled
It
passion.
was a clean, straightforward hatred. Does that resonate with you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, yes, I
Yeah.
don't feel that way now.
Right.
You know, with a little bit of education, I learned that they were fighting their Revolutionary War, and they were fighting for their country. These people in Washington, people whose visions of that war were so out of touch with reality,
Mm,
and Americans, young Americans, died because of it, and nobody's ever been held accountable.
mm,
Um, I can get really angry, and I have, I mean, almost everybody I have friendships with, we're all Vietnam veterans, we're all combat veterans, and you know, I worked really, really hard for years not to let Vietnam become the most important part of my life, which I was fortunate that I was able to do that. You know, my job with the Park Service and as an historical architect dwarfs the Vietnam experience. I mean, I still have a professional legacy of buildings that are going to be around for generations because of the work we did. And that's the good part. Um, you know, Vietnam was for me, you know, 6 months of an unreal reality. It was all very sobering. Um, because, you know, we're just back from 29 Palms a couple of weeks, and I was inside the driver's compartment of an M109 tightening an engine mount, and Staff Sergeant Nunnally stuck his head on the turret and says, "Brooks Miller, you got orders." And I just said, "I'm not old enough." And he goes, "You will be." And 2 days later, I'm going home for 20 days leave, and then the staging battalion, and then right to Vietnam. You know, not much of a transition period. So, I mean, I had bought a surfboard. You know, I was at Camp Domar at Camp Pendleton, and spent my weekends camping on the beach and surfing. And, you know, payday weekends, I'd go up to Disneyland, and, you know, I used to, and, you know, I'm thinking, well, this isn't so bad. And then it all changed. And then I went through a 6-month learning how to survive course. We got pulled out of Vietnam in December 69, January. Well, my battery got pulled out of Vietnam right before Thanksgiving in 69. I was transferred to 3rd Anglico at Jewel Inn, where I spent a couple months and came back the end of January, and spent 6 months on Okinawa before I came home. So that was a nice transition.
I was wondering that because I think, you know, I know the Army then moves into Northern I Corps, and I was
Yes,
wondering if you were one of the last Marines up there.
we were literally one of the last Marines out.
Yeah, because the Army.
Us, the Marines. You know, they told us that Arvins were taking over our positions,
Mm,
and we had no respect for the Arvin. And I remember we were taking up 2 or 3 layers of sandbags and putting grenades, laying them on the sandbag with the pin pulled, and then putting the sandbag on top of the spoon.
wow.
You know, there was a lot, you know, I guess there was a level of hate there that I've never experienced
Oh,
since.
with the intention of exacting some
Revenge.
feeling of revenge on the Arvin for not being a
Yeah, why were
reliable ally?
American? Yeah, why were Americans dying and Arvins were running away? You know, it was their country. You know, if people can't fight for their own country, why should Americans die?
And was that your feeling at the time? I mean, it sounds like it was with the hand grenades.
Oh yeah, we all felt it was very common feeling amongst us. You know,
Did it
the
ever?
Arvins were legendary for their cowardness.
But
I mean, I
then,
know there were good units, but
yeah, but then you described the NVA. Whatever you want to say about them, they're not cowards.
no,
How did
they
that?
were.
Yeah, so I'm always curious about that because I understand in terms of language, there are dialect differences between North and South, but basically we're talking the same language, we're talking the same culture. It's not a big country, but there's such a dramatic difference just focusing on the NVA and the ARVN. Have you ever wondered about what it, how is it that it was so different?
I think because the Arvin were fighting for something. I mean, the NVA were fighting for something tangible, and the Arvin were fighting for a corrupt government.
Mm,
And you know, we used to the Arvin were very contemptible. I just
mm, yeah.
no respect. It's almost like the NVA we held up with a little bit of admiration because they were just as good as we were. We were good, they were good, and I'm not going to say the fights were ever fair, but they were pretty ferocious. We had sappers in the wire up at Julin, and let me clarify this a little bit. You know,
Mm,
yeah, Mutter's Ridge was my first combat experience, but it wasn't my last.
right.
You know, it just, you know, post-traumatic stress disorders from a traumatic event. Well, I had 6 months of traumatic events, and I was just in artillery. You know, got ambushed on a mine sweep. We had sappers in the wire. We got rocketed and mortared several times a week. They always knew where we were. It's hard to hide self-propelled artillery.
Right.
And then, you know, we had batteries, you know, all over the place. And I wish I'd have gotten frequent helicopter miles.
Mm, mm,
Um, you know, not a week went by. Well, the context of my environment was you had a week on guard, which was where you were on guard from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that's the week you would do mine sweeps and fill sandbags and do whatever needed to be done. And then the alternative week, I was a track vehicle mechanic. And on those weeks I was a track vehicle mechanic, I was always somewhere, you know, mostly by helicopter, sometimes by personnel carrier.
so going out to an LZ or to an outpost and
To
fixing
different fire support bases,
yeah.
you know, doing maintenance on these guns. And, you know, and when you move around like that, you're moving into other targets. And that's why we mostly flew, because we were taking parts with us in our toolkits. And but if you had to drive, you know, you were always getting sniped at. Once hit a mine.
Mm,
It was a shit show, excuse me.
yeah.
But
Now, you know, you've expressed your view about the war, you know, the view that you've come to at the time, let's say 4 months in. Um, did you think at the time that the war was winnable, the way it was being prosecuted?
oh no, we knew. I mean, it didn't take us long, me or any of us, to figure that we were just there to do our time, stay alive, and go home. I didn't know. Nobody I was with ever voiced approval for the war. You know, it was a lesson in survivability. It was. There aren't adjectives to describe it.
Yeah.
You know, you're sleeping underground during the monsoon. You know, you have to get up and I'm living under like 4 to 6 feet of sandbags and steel plate matting, you'd have to get up a couple times during the night, empty your cot out because water was building up.
From the rain.
Constantly wet, your feet are rotten. You get
Rat,
so
probably.
you get so sick and tired of C rations.
Mm.
You know, I knew, like, when they would give us a case of C rations and we would break the steel bands on them, I knew from the way the case was where the meals were that I wanted.
Well, yeah, so maybe we could lighten up just for a second here. And which sea ration did you like the most, and which, sounds like after a while you come to hate them all, but which did you like the most and which did you like the least?
Well, my absolute favorite was beef with spice sauce. And you heat that on a heat tab and throw cheese in, and it was just delectable. And of course, we had our Tabasco sauce.
Right. Yeah.
Ham and lima beans and scrambled eggs and ham.
Yeah.
We should have given those to the North Vietnamese.
I keep hearing about ham and lima beans. So maybe that was part of Ho Chi Minh's scheme. I don't know, but
yeah, they had research and developers working in the States. And
yeah.
the ham and eggs, after opening the ham and eggs, after about a minute, the eggs start to turn green. So it's like, and I never saw Dr. Seuss there.
Yeah.
But
well, whoever invented the ham and lima bean sea rations,
I hope they're rotting in hell.
because I have yet to hear anything good about them. You said that you were wounded. I think you were wounded more than once.
Just once.
Once. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to just share what happened in that case?
Yeah, it was during the monsoon, and in our bunker, we had a wood floor built out of pallets, and it was cold. The temperature was down to like 75 degrees, maybe 72 degrees. We were freezing to death. And we were heating our bunker with an alcohol stove, and the flames started to flicker real bad, meaning it was running out of alcohol. So in my infinite wisdom, I thought I could refill the canister without blowing out the flame. Didn't work. Set the floor on fire. These guys are yelling at me. So I went up to the maintenance bunker by myself, and I was up there cleaning some drill bits, reading some old issues of Playboy. And then the only thing I had with me were my boots and my shorts, no helmet, no flak jacket, nothing else. And we started taking mortars. And I was a corporal when this happened. I got scared. So I was running back to my homestead bunker where my rifle and everything was. And on the way there, a rocket went off and shrapnel came up the right side of my body. And I took a big hunk here and then little pieces here. And it knocked me down. I got up, I ran into the bunker, and a guy named Mike DeCastro, my platoon sergeant, goes, "You've been hit." And then I could feel the warmth, and I pulled my hand back and I was just covered with blood. And head wounds bleed profusely, even though they're not. So I did what was expected. I passed out. And I came to there. They had me on the LZ. Helicopter was coming in for us. And I asked our corpsman if I was going to die, and he goes, "I don't know, maybe." So I passed out again and woke up the next day. I was in Quang Tree at 3rd Med. They had shaved my head, given me 7 stitches, big stitches. If you remember MASH, where they go, "Is he enlisted or an officer?" And they said enlisted. We'll give him the big stitch. I had big stitches.
Yeah.
Great scar still there.
Wow.
These in my chest, they didn't have to stitch up. They just pressure closed them. They weren't as bad, but my head was shaved, and
Wow. How long were you offline then?
I was in the hospital for 3 days, and then I had light duty for a week.
Okay.
And that just meant no going outside the wire.
Yeah,
So
but still,
still doing other stuff. Yeah, I spent those last 2 months in a place that was called Helicopter Square. It was bordered on the west by the mountains, the north by the DMZ, on the east by Route 1, and the south was Route 9. Bad neighborhood, kind of like the ghetto of war zones.
so it sounds that's pretty close to Quang Tri then, is that?
Oh, north of Quang Tri, north of Don Hop.
North of,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it was a bad neighborhood.
Right up there.
I wish my parents had had better jobs. No.
Yeah, wow,
Um,
wow.
we used to joke about that.
So when did you actually left Vietnam then in when?
Uh, I think it was either the end of January, beginning of February, 70. And we were literally, well, we weren't the last, we were the last organized units out of Northern I Corps for the Marine Corps.
In the Marines.
The 101st moved in to where we were, but they didn't occupy like they didn't go to Julin or Cantien. They were down at C1. They didn't go all the way north.
Okay.
So they just kind of relinquished that to the North Vietnamese.
Wow.
Not long after we left, we knew that the North Vietnamese had successfully taken over that area.
The very northernmost part of I Corps.
Right, the northernmost far, yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah. You stay in the Corps until 73, so your tour is a little bit longer than most. I want to come back and ask you about sort of re-entry into the world, although you remain in uniform, and I wonder if that's kind of, well, I mean, let me ask you that now. I mean, you come back to the States, but you remain in uniform until 73. You hear from vets who say, I've heard it, I was in the boonies, I was in a firefight on Monday. I could have been in the back, but I said I didn't want to be in the back. So I'm in the boonies in a firefight on Monday, and then I'm on a farm in Wyoming on Friday. And just this
it's
incredible
pretty close. Well, again, I had that basically 6 months, a little bit less than 6 months in Okinawa. And when I was there, that's when I was selected to become a Marine security guard, the guys who guard the embassies. And, I had to extend a year, but I was so flattered. And that was such a remarkable experience. I came back from overseas, spent 30 days home on leave, had to tell my little girlfriend we couldn't get married because I signed an agreement that I wouldn't get married for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So she married somebody else. She just wanted to get married. And I did that for 2 years, and remarkable experience. I was kept in Washington, D.C. My original orders were for the American Embassy in Vientiane, Laos, and I was not going back to Southeast Asia. I've never had any desire to go back to Southeast Asia. And they said, well, we'll just send you out of Camp Lejeune and you have to finish out those 3 years. And I said, so be it. Well, because I finished second in the class, they kept me in Washington. And I was stationed at the State Department. My boss was a brigadier general. And, oh God, I can't remember his name. Really, really cool guy. He had 6 of us, 6 sergeants. Our admin officer was a major, a woman major who was a Vietnam veteran. And all the Marine security guards were coordinated through their office. And most of those 2 years, I spent escorting the families of visiting dignitaries around Washington, D.C. I wore Brooks Brothers suits and sport coats. I carried a 38. I don't know what I would have done. I mean, it was just such a great transition.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think it was helpful to you to get back into the world, but in uniform, still within the Corps, rather than this experience of I'm a soldier on Monday in the jungle in Vietnam, and on Friday I'm in Wyoming as a civilian, and there's no transition. You're just plopped from one world to the other. Do you think it
Yeah,
was an advantage for you to be in uniform a little bit longer?
for me, yes. Yeah. I mean, it was like a perfect transition.
Did you experience when you came home and you're still in uniform, um, and you have major protesting going on, into the early 70s. Did you experience any of that
Oh,
stuff
yes.
directed at you?
Yes.
Yeah,
When I was at LAX going to catch my flight from LAX to Chicago, I got spit on.
you did.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe that somebody would do that to me. So I had no hostile reaction to that person. I just, I was proud to be in my uniform. I was proud to have my ribbons on, and that somebody felt felt that angst with me that they would do that.
What happened? The person just walks up to you and face to face, just spits right in your face, or how did that?
But he spit on my chest. He spit on my chest, and I was walking to my gate, and this guy was walking the opposite way. Didn't say a word, just looked at me and spat on me. And
And
you
what
know,
did you do?
I didn't do anything. Um, you know, I I I didn't know what to do then, and to this day, people say, "Oh, I kicked his ass." Well, that's not where my mind was at. My mind was at going home, and
So did that become kind of a little scene in the airport? Did other people see it? And
other people saw it, but nobody said a word or did anything. Um, it showed me that I was coming back to a contemptuous environment. Um, you know, I was just doing what my dad and my grandfathers and great grandfathers done generations before me. And it just helped me realize that people hated the war. If they were holding me responsible for Vietnam, they were holding me, a person who hated the war, 1,000 times more than they ever could.
mm,
You know,
mm.
um, and I just I didn't hardly ever wear my uniform in public after that.